everybody, this is the Vikstrand, and as you can see, I am slowly wandering through some pretty deep snow. Much in the same way as this movie that we're gonna take a look at today, The Accidental Husband, constantly wandering through some of the oldest and most used cliches in the history of romantic comedies. I would say even that, the birth certificates of some of these cliches and some of these storylines that they're doing in this movie are so old that it was written on in hieroglyphs, for God's sake. Now, that doesn't mean that this movie is bad or anything like that, but it does have a certain amount of problem. Let's take a look at it. This is The Accidental Husband. On the radio, Emma is a well sought after sort of celebrity and relationship expert, and she has a segment where callers call in and she helps them with their love problems and stuff like that. And she has a book coming out, and she has a fiance, Richard, played by Colin Firth, and they're gonna get married, the classical New York super fancy schwancy marriage, and they're going to move into this super fancy apartment in Manhattan, as you do. And everything seems to go fine and dandy. Let's throw a little wrench into this machinery of overjoy and happiness, shall we? Because in a story on the other side of New York, we have a rough and ready fireman played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Patrick, and he's going to get married too, to his girlfriend. But the girlfriend calls Emma to talk about her relationship, and once she has done that, she calls off the wedding and he's left alone, and heartbroken, he blames her for this one. And in an act of, now I wouldn't call it a revenge, I would call it more of a act of small time revenge maybe. He has a nephew or something like that who knows computer and stuff, and can hack into anything, like, kids can in mid-2000 movies. And he goes into the records and he make it appear like Patrick is married to Emma. So now, when they're going to, talk about the wedding, they seem like, whoa, you already have a husband, so you can't marry Richard now. Whoa, 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 says Richard, and gets a little bit nervous about it. He also has, big merger coming up, and if that doesn't work, his career might be on the line and he might lose his job, and, no fancy schwancy apartment, business stuff. So Emma then has to basically go and confront our fireman and, says, how can I be married to you, blah, blah, blah. And so now she has a husband and a fiance. What to do in this situation? What's a girl to do? Now, this movie is deep, deep, deep in all the classical tropes and all the classical storylines and all the old cliches of your typical romantic comedy. Throw in it is New York and throw in it is mid-2000s. It's going to be cliched as F. We have, people walking in the rain, and the line is not what it seems like, and a wedding has to be stopped, and, all these things that you expect to show from a movie like this will show up. Now, the casting is probably to thank for that this movie isn't gonna get a worse rating than it probably was going to be, if nothing else, because, Colin Firth is great, Uma Thurman is great, and I actually would say that Jeffrey Dean Morgan is actually pretty damn excellent in this movie. Everything always gets better with a little Negan in, but every time I see him, I always think he's gonna take out a baseball bat and be all dark and stuff. But I'm just not that into this movie. The goal of every romantic comedy is that you want the two main characters to end up together. You want them to, have this relationship, and it's kind of difficult because I don't really, am really fond of any of the characters in this movie. They're not bad, they're just not that developed. That has probably to do with the fact that this movie is very short, an hour and a half. Now, on the one hand, you do have to say that a shorter runtime helps this movie not overstay its welcome, and the pacing is pretty good. But on the other hand, you also have to say that that doesn't help with any character buildings. So it goes a little... Now, there was a point, a half-time around in this movie, where I actually thought that they were gonna pull off a Hail Mary and make this movie pretty awesome. Because then they were having this huge mistaken identity thing going on. But then they scrapped that for more cliches. Also, classic cliches in these kind of movies, they have a lot of very good side characters that barely gets the screen time they deserve and are much more interesting than our potential lovers. So hey ho, what you gonna do? If you are a big fan of romantic comedies, if you like these sort of New York based romantic comedies from the mid-2000s, there's a lot of those actually when you're thinking about it. There's no reason not to see this movie. It's competently made, it has pretty good actors, it has some jokes that lands pretty well, and if you're a sucker for these kind of cliches, be my guest and see this movie and you'll probably like it. But if you're like me, a bit, this is not really my thing, this is not gonna sway you anyway. The movie is perfectly okay and is pretty predictable, but it never goes into sappy, sugar-coated nonsense territory, so I'll give it that. A tricky movie to rate. It is about as cliched as you can get, and it is about as formulaic as you can get, and pretty predictable. But it is still a well-made movie, and has some moments that is pretty nice. I give this movie 43 points. It is a competently made romantic comedy, and for fans of this genre, this should fulfill, well, most things that you want from a movie like this. Of course, this movie is not realistic in any form or fashion, but the same thing can be said to about 95% of all movies that has ever been made. So that argument, you can always sweep that away with that doesn't hold that much water. So I'll see you next time from well so-and-so reviewing well such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.